right. We're starting our exploration of the Book of American Miscellany with this beautiful engraving. It's the Hancock House in Boston. Today our topic is John Hancock. So let's see if we can see the adjacent portrait here. There we go, Mr. Hancock. All right, so there we do have a portrait of John Hancock with a facsimile of his signature copied from the Declaration of Independence. All right, John Hancock, page 16, essay number 6. Thy spirit, independence, let me share, Lord of the lion, heart, and eagle eye. Thy steps I follow with my bosom bare, nor heed the storm that howls along the sky. Immortal liberty, whose look sublime hath blanched the tyrant's cheek in every varying clime. All right. We have much pleasure in presenting to our readers a correct portrait of the above-named celebrated patriot, whose bold and manly signature is so much admired on the Charter of our Liberties, together with a view of the old mansion house still standing in Boston. John Hancock was born at Quincy, near Boston, whence have emanated the two presidents Adams. He was the son and grandson of eminent clergymen, but having early lost his father, was indebted for a liberal education to his uncle, a merchant of great wealth, whose counting house he afterwards entered, but soon sailed for England, where he was present at the coronation of George III. His uncle dying in 1774, he succeeded to his large fortune and business. Oh, that's convenient. He was active as a member of the provincial legislature against the royal governor, and became so obnoxious to him that after the Battle of Lexington, he and Samuel Adams were accepted by name in a proclamation offering pardon to the rebels who should swear fealty to Britain. So annoying. They escaped from one door of a house as the British soldiers entered it at another, and thus their valuable persons were preserved to aid the good cause of the Revolution. Hancock was president of the Provincial Congress of Massachusetts until sent a delegate to the General Congress at Philadelphia in 1775, where he was soon chosen to succeed Peyton Randolph as president of that august assembly. He was the first to affix his signature to the Declaration of Independence, which was first published with no other name attached. He filled this important chair till 1779, when gout compelled him to retire from Congress. He was then elected governor of Massachusetts and was annually chosen from 1780 to 1785, and after an interval of 2 years was re-elected and continued to fill the office until his death, October 8, 1793, at the age of 56 years. He acted also as president of the Convention of the State for the adoption of the federal Constitution, for which he voted. His talents were rather useful than brilliant. He seldom spoke, but his knowledge of business and facility in dispatching it, together with a keen insight into the characters of men, rendered him peculiarly fit for public life. Being well acquainted with parliamentary forms, he inspired respect by his intention, impartiality, and dignity. In private life, he was remarkable for his hospitality and beneficence. He was a complete gentleman of the old school, both in appearance and manners, and was a magnificent liver, lavishly bountiful, keeping a coach and 6 horses, and distinguished for his politeness and affability. Well, if you have a coach and 6 horses, I guess it's easy to be affable. When Washington consulted the legislature of Massachusetts upon the propriety of bombarding Boston, Hancock advised it being done immediately, if it would benefit the cause, although nearly his whole property consisted in houses and other real estate in that town. Carroll of Carrollton and Hancock probably risked more property on the event of the struggle than any other 2 individuals. The estate at Quincy, which was his inheritance, is now the property of our distinguished countryman, the venerable ex-president John Quincy Adams. The first provocation of the British government, which created a spirit of civil discord among her provinces, was the imposition of duties upon the importation of foreign merchandise. Wait, that's familiar. The imposition of duties upon the importation of foreign merchandise and other injuries impairing the prosperity of the colonial commerce. Upon this occasion, all the address and diligence of Mr. Hancock was exerted in opposition to a system of legislation so rapacious and tyrannical. It was by his agency, and that of a few other citizens of Boston, that for the purpose of procuring a revocation of these duties, associations were instituted to prohibit the importation of British goods, a policy which soon afterwards, being imitated by other colonies, first served to awaken the apprehensions of the people and to kindle those passions that were essential to the success of the war and the preservation of their liberties. The agitation of this subject produced no common animosity, and in some instances acts of atrocity and outrage, of which we may mention as among the most conspicuous the case of Mr. Otis, who at the instigation of a British officer was assailed by a band of ruffians with a violence which impaired his reason and hastened his death. About the same time, a vessel belonging to Mr. Hancock, being loaded, it was said, in contravention of their revenue laws, was seized by the custom house officers and carried under the guns of an armed vessel at the time in the harbor for security. But the people, exasperated by this offensive exertion of authority, assembled, and pursuing the officers, beat them with clubs and drove them on board their vessels for protection. The boat of the collector was then burnt in triumph by the mob, and the houses of some of his most obnoxious adherents were, in the first transports of popular fury, razed to the ground. Thus Mr. Hancock, in more ways than one, contributed to set the great wheel of the Revolution in motion, though he could not himself have approved such acts, which were disapproved by the legal authorities. Yet Hancock derived from his connection with the affair with an increased popularity. At an assembly of the citizens, Mr. Hancock and others were appointed to request of the governor a removal of the British troops from the town which the governor attempted to evade. A second committee being selected, of which Mr. Hancock was chairman, voted the excuses made inadmissible, and by a more peremptory tone of expostulation, urged and obtained their removal. This governor sounds like a screaming match. This governor had complimented Hancock in 1767 with a lieutenancy, but declaring his determination to hold no office under a man whose vices and principles he considered hostile to the liberties of his country, he tore up the commission in the presence of many citizens, for which bold act he received the severe reprehension and threats of the royal government. Of the modesty of Hancock there is a very beautiful anecdote related by his biographers. That there were members of the first Congress of superior age to his, and men at the same time of preeminent virtues and talents, will not be denied. The occasion was one upon which calmness was essential, for rarely in the vicissitudes of nations has it happened that interests more sacred have been confined to the infirmity of human wisdom and integrity, or that a spectacle more imposing has been exhibited to human observation. Mr. Hancock's timidity at being called to fill the chair was relieved, it is said, by a strong-nerved member from the South, who led or bore him to the speaker's seat. When placed in that conspicuous position, he presided with a dignity and capacity that extorted the respect and approbation of even his enemies. After his death, his body lay in state at his mansion, where great multitudes thronged to pay the last offices of their grief and affection. His obsequies were attended with great pomp and solemnity, and amid the tears of his countrymen he was committed to the dust. His wife was a Miss Quincy, whom he married about 20 years before his death. She was the daughter of an eminent magistrate of Boston and one of the most distinguished families of New England. No children of this connection were left to inherit his fortune or perpetuate his name, his only son having died during his youth. In stature, Mr. Hancock was above the middle size, of excellent proportion of limbs, of extreme benignity of countenance, possessing a flexible and harmonious voice, a manly and dignified aspect. By the improvement of these natural qualities from observation and extensive intercourse with the world, he had acquired a pleasing elocution with the most graceful and conciliating manners. Of his talents, it is a sufficient evidence that in the various stations he filled, he acquitted himself with an honorable distinction and capacity. His communications to the General Assembly and his correspondence as President of Congress are enduring proofs of his putting his shoulder effectively to the wheel of public affairs. His knowledge was practical and familiar. He neither penetrated the intricacies of profound research, nor did he mount to inaccessible elevations. It's okay to be average, come on. Hancock first put his name to the immortal Declaration of Independence. Had his life been marked by no other event, it would have entitled him to ever-enduring renown. But in connection with that act, he combined great and useful wisdom in the councils of our infant nation, and his name will descend to posterity with unqualified luster. The old mansion in which Hancock lived is situated on the elevated ground in Beacon Street, fronting towards the south, and commanding a fine view of the common. The principal building is of hewn stone, finished not altogether in the modern style, nor yet in the ancient Gothic taste. It is raised 12 or 13 feet above the street, and the ascent is through a garden bordered with flowers and small trees. 56 feet in breadth, the front terminates in 2 lofty stories. While occupied by Governor Hancock, the east wing formed a spacious hall, and the west wing was appropriated to domestic purposes, the whole embracing, with the stables, coach house, and other offices, an extent of 220 feet. In those days there was a delightful garden behind the mansion, ascending gradually to the high lands in the rear. This spot was also handsomely embellished with glasses and a variety of excellent fruit trees. From the summer house might be seen West Boston, Charlestown, the north part of the town, the colleges, the bridges of the Charles and Mystic rivers, the ferry of Winismet, and fine country of that vicinity to great extent. The south and west views took in Roxbury, the highlands of Dorchester and Brookline, the blue hills of Milton and Braintree, together with numerous farmhouses, verdant fields, and laughing valleys. Upon the east, the islands of the harbor, from Castle William to the lighthouse, engaged the sight by turns, which at least was lost in the ocean or only bounded by the horizon. Governor Hancock inherited this estate from his uncle Thomas Hancock, Esquire, who erected that building in 1737. At that period, the court part of the town was at the north end, and his fellow citizens marveled not a little that he should have selected for a residence such an unimproved spot as this then was. In the lifetime of that venerable gentleman, the doors of hospitality were opened to the stranger, the poor, and distressed, and annually, on the anniversary of the ancient and honorable artillery company, he entertained the governor and council and most respectable personages at his house. The like attentions were shown to the same military body by Governor Hancock, who inherited all of the urbanity, generous spirit, and virtues of his uncle. It is now, we believe, the property of some of the descendants of Governor Hancock and rented as a private dwelling. But since the demise of that eminent man, the hand of time and improvement has been constantly contending around and against it. It cannot long resist such attacks, and before many years elapse, this famous mansion will probably be razed to the ground, and its place supplied by others. We do have a small bonus essay. This doesn't appear to be related to the John Hancock essay, and it's not in the table of contents. But let's go ahead and read this tiny little blurb here. It's called Government of Temper. Government of Temper. Every human creature is sensible of the propensities to some infirmity of temper, which it should be his care to correct and subdue, particularly in this early period of life. Else, when arrived at a state of maturity, he may relapse into those faults which were originally in his nature, and which will require to be diligently watched and kept under through the whole course of life, since nothing leads more directly to the breach of charity and to the injury and molestation of our fellow creatures than the indulgence of an ill temper. Excellent.